From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
Travel and tourism are a mainstay of Rhode Island's economy, and fewer industries have been hit harder by the pandemic than hospitality. With the winter thaw around the corner and summer on the horizon, what is the outlook for hotels and restaurants? Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside 12 News Politics editor Ted Nesi, and joining us in studio to talk about the hospitality outlook, we have Kristen Adamo. She is the president and CEO of the Providence, Warwick Convention and Visitors Bureau, and Dale Venturini, president and CEO of the Rhode Island Hospitality Association. Welcome to both of you, and I hope that because you're both here, that does mean spring is indeed around the corner and the outlook is good, at least from a weather perspective. But Kristen, I want to start just sort of broadly with where things stand through each of your lenses. You have pointed out, Kristen, that unlike the southern part of the state that has the beaches that act as a magnet, the people you represent also rely so much on major events around Providence. What is the mood right now?
So right now I feel like we have just gotten through a lot of the crisis, and it has been hard. Providence hotels have lost about 70% of their revenue from 19 into 2020. Warwick has lost about 46. So I tell people, we have a problem in Warwick, we have a full-on crisis in Providence. And to your point, it's an event-based economy. So what we're looking at now is how do we dig ourselves out? And we had some great news about things starting to open up, and Governor McKee has been very responsive to that. But we need to look at it in two ways. We need to look at the short term, which is hundreds of people, 150 people, but we also have to look at the long term, which are these big events, because we have things like PPAC and Waterfire that haven't happened in over a year, and they haven't worked in over a year, and you just can't flip a switch. You know, PPAC needs a few months, Waterfire needs a few months to ramp up. So we have to look at the short term and the long term. And of course, the biggest thing for us is the Rhode Island Convention Center. So it was really devastating to me to hear that they're going to keep the center basically on hold through June, because I pulled $6 million worth of business just from that announcement, and we have $4 million in September. That really needs to happen.
I do want to drill down a little bit more on the convention center so folks
Sure.
at home can get an understanding about the impact of that. But before we get there, Dale, to you, same question, especially with restaurants. What's the mood right now?
Slightly optimistic, and I think a couple of things have happened. Every day I look at the three things that we have to look at when we're balancing what is happening with COVID, and that is consumer confidence, the economic impact, of course, and then the safety of our customers and our employees. So looking at that, the governor has been opening up gradually, and then yesterday to go back to pre-pause with the 66% occupancy has lifted. But I think the thing that we're looking the most forward to is his next week's conference, when he's going to talk about that March 14th date. Mm-hmm. He's been intimating about opening up even more. We have sent a letter with some of our requests and looking at it. The critical part of what is happening right now, and where I think the optimism comes from, is the vaccine is starting to roll out. We're not hearing as much negativity about that, and people are getting vaccinated. Daylight savings time is about to happen, right? The weather is getting a little bit warmer, and when you see that sun out, it just changes people's feelings. So you put all of that together, and the puzzle starts becoming complete. But the challenge that I always have is that I have restaurants right now that still have not opened indoors. That has been their choice for their business model. And I have restaurants that would love to open 100% with no restrictions. And there's a balancing act in between all of that to find out what's the right thing to do for everyone. So consumer confidence is right now top of our mind. And we're working on some small social media campaigns and the like. The good news is, out of all of this, we've built such an amazing community. We've always had community. It's what we call our culture at the Hospitality Association. I'm lucky enough that I'm on the board of directors of the CVB and a past chairwoman. I'm on the Convention Center Authority. We're all talking to one another and strategizing, and not that we didn't do it before, but now it's daily. Sometimes I talk to Kristen 5 and 6 times a day, But it's built this community, and it's also built a community of other organizations that may not seem to be in line, but they've determined that they are and want to be part of a solution. So that's where I feel the optimism coming forth. It's not only us that are fighting this fight. We've got a lot of other folks supporting us.
Let me ask you, Dale, sticking with you for a second. Looking back over the past year, I've certainly watched local restaurants that I love, that I worried about, especially during the pause and at times when things were really restricted. We have seen restaurants close in some cases. We've seen others that seem to have found their way. What do you think made, not to be judgmental toward those who maybe didn't make it, but what did you find among the restaurants that were able to get through this really tough period? Were there any things you saw that was united across a lot of them, or strategies that really worked for them to get through this?
Well, one of the critical components was them getting some money to go forward a little bit. So the PPP helped immensely, and there were some people that just couldn't apply for it, so they didn't have the ability. This came on so quickly that we had to find any avenue we could to help people, whatever that was, and out of the box thinking. But having money, and grant money particularly, loans were there. We had some short-term loans immediately that Commerce helped us with, but they were a loan. They had to be paid back. So it was whether or not you could even apply for the PPP money that was almost a deciding factor. Then there were other factors. Somebody could have been of the age that they were ready to retire in 2 years and decided, you know what, this is my time, and I'm either going to pass it on or there's no family to pass it on to. But I talk to my counterparts around the country. We have not had as many closures as most states have. We have documented that we could truly have closed maybe 25 or 30 in the mix. We had a couple of hundred that went into hibernation, and for that time, right after the pause, it was like, where are we going around the holidays? They chose to close. Some of them closed because they wanted to do some construction and do some freshening up. But now we're starting to see people open again. And then there's this other side of people that started new, took over that old space, always wanted to open the restaurant, found that they had the wherewithal to do it, and now you're seeing some new openings. It's an antithesis, by the way, to what's going on right now.
Yeah, and Kristen, you mentioned something interesting I wanted you to spell out again as we look back and then look forward, how different the experiences last year of northern Rhode Island and the Providence area were versus southern coastal Rhode Island. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, so for various reasons, southern Rhode Island has a little more strength in leisure tourism. So you've got beautiful beaches, you have a lot more outdoor activity. So they were able to rebound more quickly in the summer. Largely in Providence, you have an event-based economy. So it's meetings and conventions, sporting events, and then layered on top of that, things like Waterfire or PVD Fest or Pride. So all of that was wiped out. And then there was also this sort of movement where people tended to stay away from cities, and that was ubiquitous across the country. So we had a tougher summer and we also had the Omni closed and the Graduate closed. So we had a lot more of an uphill battle. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see that for at least the first half of this summer as well, because I don't think June and July will have a lot of events. So what we're looking at is looking forward and seeing if we can do some product development, have more events in. The Take It Outside grants that Commerce did, I think, are going to still be helpful again as we do more outdoor events this year. So I think we've just got to change our way of thinking. And then I also think when federal aid comes in, we can't just paint tourism with a broad brush, because quite frankly, Providence needs a lot more help than even my other city, which is Warwick. So we have to really look at it proportionately.
I want to pull up a chart that you sent us to illustrate what you're talking about.
Yep.
And this is the Providence hotel occupancy rate, and you can see it on the screen right there. In purple is 2019, red is 2020. I mean, that is a stark story. And I bring this up to talk about the convention center because these are Providence hotel occupancy rates. And as you pointed out earlier in this show, some not so great news. The convention center used as a field hospital, used to test, used now for vaccinations, and now it is being kept, quote unquote, warm. As a place to continue to do these operations. Are you preparing? You said maybe midsummer. Is that the most optimistic outlook for when the convention center is going to start ramping up, or could it be a year?
No, I think it's not this summer, but it's not a year. So what we're looking at is, first of all, We always supported using the convention center as a hospital. We know the idea is to have Rhode Islanders be safe, and the staff there has done an amazing job.
Well, I mean, you couldn't even put events in there if you wanted to anyway at this point, so why not use it?
But right now is the time where we need to start talking about getting it back. So if they let it go as a hospital at the end of June, it could take 2 or 3 months for it to become back to its original state. And the issue with that is, yes, we know we're not going to have 2,000 people in the convention center immediately, but we have $4 million worth of business on the books in September. Now that's pre-COVID value. So even if we got a quarter of that, that's $1 million month for the city of Providence, and we haven't had one of those in probably a year and a half. So that's really important, and it's really the first bit of recovery that we'll do. And we're taking steps to mitigate that. With some of the Heart Grant money that we got from Commerce, we were able to buy television equipment. So we're going to build a studio in the convention center to do what we call hybrid meetings. So maybe you have 300 people, and then another 10,000.
You're not going after our business.
I was going to say,
right?
is this competition?
You're not going to do Newsmakers.
Totally
Kristen presents Newsmakers. I want to ask both of you the same question, but for each of the industries you look after. I'll stick with you, Kristen, and then go to you, Dale. If there was one thing, whether it's for Governor McKee and Commerce at the state level, or it's something you want from the congressional delegation to get into that relief bill, or maybe it's in process and you think it's the biggest priority right now, what would it be for recovery for your industry?
I think that we have to give more funding to the hotels, the event venues, the arts community, the downtown merchants. Those are the ones that have suffered the most, particularly the hotels. We were very fortunate that the Heart Grants were able to offset some of the hotels, but there was a room cap that was about 200, so that left a wide swath of hotels that were not eligible.
Including, you've said, some local hotels, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that people don't understand is you see a Marriott flag or a Hilton flag and you think, well, they're big corporations going to take care of them. A lot of those are locally owned. You look at the Prakashani Group in Cranston or some of the other groups, and they're Rhode Island-based businesses that happen to either own or manage these hotels. The other thing is it takes 13 rooms to keep a housekeeper employed. And that's what I think about every day, is we have to get these people back to work. They've been unemployed for a year now, and I think that as much federal aid as we can trickle down into those hotels and our arts and our downtown businesses, and that's for the future too. I can't sell a destination that doesn't have great restaurants and a vibrant arts community and a hotel product. So it's a long-range vision.
And Dale, same question especially for the restaurants. What if there was one thing, one lever to pull, one policy you think would make the biggest difference? What is it?
Well, along the same line, because I represent the hotel, so that too. However, I have to add the caterers to this, because restaurants got a lot of help. Caterers didn't really get a lot of help much help until recently. But there's one word, and it's predictability. We need some predictability, and I know that we can't say, absolute, we're going to do all of these things, because COVID still is king here, unfortunately. So. What we need is maybe some metrics to say, when this happens, we know this can happen, and to move on, because what we're seeing is people canceling, and after a while, you can only take 1 or 2 cancels before they find a place that will take them. And right now, our 2 states, our contiguous states, are starting to open up a little more. Now, they're announcing they're opening up a little more. They're not opening for a little bit of time. And
like we saw Connecticut in 2 weeks, they said yesterday. Yeah.
Correct. So we're hoping that when Governor McKee makes his announcement on the 14th, it will, be a mirror there. We did send them a chart of what's going on right now in each of the states, because we are so close to each other. There's a lot of cross-bordering. And we've heard it. My caterers will call me, say, I lost a wedding to this place. I lost an event to this place. I lost a meeting to this place. So it's really predictability.
Well, we have less than 2 minutes left, and I do want to bring up weddings specifically because we're hearing on March 14th that they might be making some announcements around weddings. What are you hearing? What do you think they're going to say?
Well, yesterday there was an announcement that beginning in April, hopefully, that the numbers will go up from to 100 indoors, and I believe it was 200 or 150 outdoors. Now I have to check my.
It's on our website if people want to check.
It's on the website. Thank you. There's so many numbers.
Yeah,
and
there are.
Everything changes within hours sometimes.
Tell us about it.
Yes.
We feel you.
Right?
Yes.
So, that's the optimism. And then there's going to be talking about pod dancing. I remember back several months ago when I was working with Commerce on some of the because they would call us a lot to understand the business. And we talked, they said, no dancing. I said, you're not going to tell the father of that little girl, his daughter, that she can't dance with her daddy. So they did do the ceremonial dancing. But now I understand this, the pod dancing, and we haven't figured out what that looks like just yet.
What is pod dance? I'm just going to ask you, what is pod dancing?
Well, that means you dance within the people that you came with.
With your pod?
With your pod. So in other words, your
Would
table.
I have to dance with Tim?
You have to dance with Tim.
Terrible.
Yeah,
Just
well,
saying.
that's because I try to lead.
I would pay to see that, though. So.
All right. So look, the stimulus package, with a minute left, stimulus package is being debated down in Washington. We touched on it a couple of times here. Do you have a clearer sense as to what could be in that, and in terms of your industry, Kristen, and how that would help and how critical it is that it passes?
I think it's critical for the state of Rhode Island, because the work that we do, and particularly the convention center, we're an economic generator for the rest of the state. We're bringing people in who are spending money and then leaving, so they're not taking services. They're just coming here and spending it and going. And so we need that money for the state to come back, not just our industry.
Kristen Adamo, Dale Venturini, thank you so much for joining us on the program. When we come back, Ted and I break down the big headlines of the week. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside 12 News Politics editor Ted Nesi. Ted, before we talk about the new governor, let's talk about the old one. Now Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo, and she had, you and I were sitting in the Target 12 office watching the results come in. I was surprised by the number of votes she got, 84-15. I mean, a lot of Republican support. What was it, 30 Republicans?
I think it was 30. I think it was over 30 in the end. Republicans went both with her. Yeah.
Yeah, that was surprising. And then she was just sworn in by the vice president this week, and the day after she appeared on MSNBC for her first big national interview in a new role. Here's a little bit of what she had to say.
So as our new Commerce Secretary, congratulations. What's your first order of business?
Thank you. Getting Americans back to work. As governor, which I was until yesterday, I saw firsthand every day the struggle of everyone really in America, small businesses. You have small businesses that have been in families for generations that are closing. I'm a doer. That's what people should know about me. And I'm excited to do for the American people.
Secretary Raimondo on MSNBC this week after she was sworn in. Ted, do you have a sense at all as to what her day-to-day life is now very, very different? Do you know what it looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked a little bit to some of the folks around her, and I think it's a whirlwind, right? She was on the job at the Commerce Department. First, you get pictured geographically. Their building is the Hoover Building, just a few steps away from the White House. So she's right there in the center of things in Washington. And, she has an agency of 46,000 employees. She needs to get, obviously not all of them work right there sitting with her, but even her senior staff, most of those people were picked by the Biden administration. There's only a handful of people, Matt Bucci, Nell Abernathy, Kevin Gallagher, who are with her, who came with her. So she's got to meet her own staff and get to know them. And then just the portfolio of topics that she has now, a lot of things that do not come up in Rhode Island, like running a weather service or counting the census. I mean, she did do the census here, I suppose, but all the tariffs with China. So I think there's just a huge amount of getting up to speed and also getting used to being on that big stage. And even in that interview, not being a governor and kind of independent, right? She mentioned the Biden administration is doing a great job. And my thought was, you are the Biden administration now, Secretary.
Has she said yet, has she announced officially what personally she and her family are going to do?
She has, and people keep asking us about that. And last I heard from her, a former spokesperson, that they were working that out as a family. Obviously, I think it would be tough not to be living most of her time in Washington right now, and they'll have to decide that, I feel. But she does have two kids in school who I know she's said before, and we'd say this about a male secretary too, that she has to think about what they want too.
Let's pivot now to Governor McKee. He's being formally inaugurated this weekend, and if you're watching this on a Sunday, Ted is going to be covering that event, so check out our newscast. But obviously the biggest thing for him to handle right now is the pandemic. On the horizon, which is very important, is the budget, which is due, I believe, Thursday, right? And right now he has to close this big deficit without even knowing what might be coming out of Washington and the aid package there. He was asked about this earlier in this week, and this is what he had to say.
Yeah, so we're still working on the budget, and I would think that that's another call I have today, about a 3-hour call, finalizing those details, and when we get those details, I'll let you know. We're going to try not to raise taxes, but not to take away from programs, and I think that some of the, as I've been talking about for weeks, right, that we're not going to talk in particulars about the budget until we have a clear picture about what the federal money is going to do.
I mean, you just heard it right there. He said, well, I'll let you know. I mean, he can't answer that question, right? How do you carve out a budget when you don't know what could be coming out of Washington?
Well, look, you have to, my understanding is he has to set the budget based on current law. And the Biden bill, I do not think will have passed into law by next Thursday. And also, if it passes the night before, you can't rewrite a $10, $12 billion budget overnight with that. But that said, they may
would they do Budget A and Budget B?
Well, I think what happened, remember, this is not the final budget, right? This is just the kickoff for the General Assembly. And if $1 billion+ is coming into the state from President Biden's relief bill, which looks like it'll pass the Senate in the next 48 hours or so, I think they'll obviously go back and heavily revise. And you may see him make choices in the budget, and they say, here are the list of things we want taken out of the budget we propose if the Biden money comes in. Maybe some kind of fee increase that he's like, I don't actually want this, and hopefully the Biden money covers it. We've seen that kind of thing before when there was a big amount of money pending.
The budget cooks in the kitchen, are they the same under the McKee administration as they were Raimondo, meaning do they have a lot of experience here?
Absolutely. He brought in Tom Mulaney as a senior advisor, who's been the state budget officer for many years. I know Jonathan Wilmer, who is the chief budget guy for Governor Raimondo, is working on it. But of course, Dan McKee has his own ideas about the budget. He has people around him, both informally and formally, who have their own thoughts. So he certainly has input. I don't think this is just a Raimondo budget with McKee's name on it.
So you have been talking to Senator Jack Reed's office about what is in the Biden plan right now for the state of Rhode Island and cities and towns. It's a big chunk of money.
Yeah, it's a kind of astounding amount of money. And you heard that a little in the first half with Dale and Kristen Adamo. I mean, we're talking about $1.1 billion is the estimate from 2 weeks ago just for the state government. Then I think over $500 million more to the cities and towns. And that is just like checks to governments to balance their budgets. That's before $1,400 goes to each of us or most of us, or we're sending out grants to restaurants and things like that. I think if this Biden bill passed, I never thought Biden would get anywhere near $1.9 trillion.
Yeah,
if it passes to this level, I mean, it's kind of rocket fuel on the economy, at least for the coming months, to have that much money wash out into the system.
Yeah, and a lot of cities and towns, and particularly school budgets, are really hinging
on. We saw
on
Bristol Warren, they're having fights at their school committee, other places,
So a lot to consider as that is being debated down in Washington. All right, so I do want to pivot because we've been talking so much about the governor's, the change of power that's been going on. I feel like we've been talking about it all year. But there are pieces already moving into place on who will replace Jorge Elorza as mayor of Providence. Our Steph Machado filed another episode of her Pulse of Providence this week. Her guest was City Councilwoman Nirva LaFortune. Steph asked if she will be a candidate next year. Take a listen.
I just want to ask you something that's on everyone's mind. You seem to be gearing up and fundraising for a potential run for mayor of Providence. Where are you at right now? Are you running for mayor next year?
Well, it's still early. I am exploring. I'm speaking to constituents, residents throughout the city, talking to people, listening to their concerns and their needs. And hopefully I'll be able to make a decision sometime this year.
Steph, we get that answer a lot ourselves. Very rarely does someone announce during an interview. But, I'm sitting there and I'm listening to the councilwoman, and that's the mayor of Providence race. Then we're going to have the governor's race. There's going to be a bunch of races up in Massachusetts, a lot of state office holders. 2022 is going to be nuts.
There's going to be bananas next year around here. Yeah, I mean, we have, just even the fact that there's going to be one seat in Congress for the first time in Rhode Island. Most likely, Secretary Raimondo will have to tell us pretty soon what the census numbers show. That's one of her first jobs. Yeah, and as you said, Massachusetts as well. I mean, on both sides of the border, you have all these general offices opening up. Remember, in Rhode Island, 4 of the 5 general offices would have been term limited if Governor Raimondo hadn't left, Secretary Raimondo. And now you have still 3. There's going to be, has to be a new Secretary of State, has to be a new Treasurer, has to be a new Lieutenant Governor. Although then you'll have a new Lieutenant Governor who's going to get picked. They'll be running for a full term. Dan McKee's running for a full term. I know you talked to Mayor Lorza this week. He's not ruling out running for governor still, even though McKee's in office. Nellie Gorbea didn't rule it out on this show recently. So I think it's going to be quite a fascinating political year, and it's really starting to happen now because of the governor's transition and all the pieces that's kicking off.
I need to tell you I'm taking 2022 as a sabbatical, so I won't be here for that. Well, good luck to you, though.
Yes, thank you so much.
And just real quick, 30 seconds here. We listened to Dan McKee talk a lot about teachers. Do you think there's a political element to that in the push to get teachers vaccinated? Because he's never been the darling of the teachers union.
Yeah, I think it'd be naive not to think so, right? I mean, Bob Walsh of NEARI told our Eli Sherman this week that, he says they've fought many times to keep Dan McKee from holding statewide office. Now he says we're starting from scratch. It's a brand new day for Dan McKee. But that said, does that mean he's going to have to soft pedal his support for charter schools? How is he going to balance that so he doesn't undo the goodwill he's building up with the push to vaccinate teachers?
Ted and I talked to the leaders of the hospitality industry in the first half of the program for the outlook going into this summer. If you missed it, it's on WPRI.com. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.